All right, this is a weird solo F101 today, unless someone joins the Discord later, but for now, it is just me, and that is a-okay, because I am just going to yap about Canada because it was a great race. We had a great time. The whole F101 group was there watching the race, which was pretty fun. Since it was my birthday weekend, and we were treated. I said, if there was ever a race that was good to have people over to kind of watch and to enjoy, it was most definitely this one. This one's also going to be a bit of a quicker episode because we have company coming over and I need to be done with this before that happens. So it's going to be a bit of a speed run at points. For example, right now, when we talk about the standings, now, the constructors' standings are led by Mercedes. They are leading with 219 points. Following them is Ferrari with 147 points. And then following them in third place is McLaren with 106. Red Bull is behind McLaren. They're in fourth with 57 points. They're catching up slow-ish. This weekend definitely helped them catch up as McLaren did not do very well, and we'll get to that. But I think, they're above the midfield, but they're below the top teams right now. But they'll get back to the top teams, hopefully in points. If not, definitely performance. They're already kind of getting there, but with points, hopefully they get there soon. Alpine is leading the midfield. They're in fifth place. They've got 35. Then Racing Bulls below them with 21. Then Haas with 19. Williams with 7, Audi with 2, Cadillac with 0, and Aston Martin with 0. So not a lot of changes in the back three. A little bit of movement in the middle here. Um, and in the drivers' championship, you've got Antonelli in first with 131 points, Russell in second with 88, and Leclerc in third with 75. Now, no changes in our top three. However, our top four has changed. Hamilton is there now with 72. Right, he wasn't in fourth. I believe. Yeah, Norris. He was tied with Norris. So Hamilton was 72 with a huge leap. Then Norris with 58. Piastri with 48. Verstappen catching up to Piastri. He's got 43. Gasly with 20. Berman with 18. Lawson with 16. That's your top 10. Then Colapinto with 15 points, followed by Hadjar with 14. Behrman through Hadjar, it's real close. One good race, and even put Gasly in there. One good race is going to move those people, any of those guys, up or down in the standings. Then you've got Sainz with 6, followed by Lindblad with 5. They're very close. Bortoleto with 2, Ocon and Albon with 1 apiece. Hulk, Bottas, Perez, Stroll, and Alonso with 0 all. So that is where we stand at the end of Canada and before we get into Monaco, which is next weekend, not this coming one. So this is just a one-off preview episode, our solo show. Um, it is it was great. Um, my tagline for this was now this is pod racing. It was a Star Wars weekend. Mandalorian and Grogu came out, went and saw it opening night. It was great. And then we got some good racing afterwards. So double good weekend there. Let's talk about the sprint really quickly while I take a drink of water real quick. So the sprint finishing order was Russell, Norris, Antonelli. That was your podium, your top three. Then Piastri, Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen, and Lindblad. That is your point score. Following them were Colapinto, Sainz, Lawson, Bortoleto, Ocon, Perez, Hulkenberg, Stroll, Bottas, Behrman, Albon, Gasly, Hadjar, and then Alonso did not finish the sprint. Technically, Perez finished up in 11th, but he got a 10-second time penalty, so he went down to 14th. Hulkenberg also got a 10-second penalty to move him down to 15th, but I don't remember where he finished in the race before that. The main story of the sprint, or I'm sorry, the sprint. The main story of the sprint was the Antonelli versus Russell battle. Antonelli was putting the pressure on Russell multiple times, but couldn't get the move to stick and went off track. The two did make contact, which really made Antonelli mad. He was fuming on the radio. He was complaining a lot. So much so, in fact, that Toto had to step in and tell him to stop moaning. Literally, stop moaning were his exact words, and that they will discuss it as a team internally and later. Ultimately, Antonelli's failed moves did allow Norris to take second place in a McLaren that looked like it wasn't far from challenging the Mercedes. Antonelli came home in a very angry third, and Russell took home the sprint win in a performance that looked like it was going to turn his fortunes in the World Drivers' Championship around. This race, or the race, however, would prove to be a very different story for anyone who looked good on Sunday. Or on Saturday, my bad. Wow, ruined my own dramatic moment there. Our race finishing order was Antonelli, Hamilton, Verstappen. What a podium. That podium, by the way, is Hamilton and Verstappen's 61st time sharing a podium. And if you combine all of their podiums, all three drivers' podiums together, it is the podium combination with the most, I think, wins. I think it was the three driver, if like that podium combination had more wins over their careers than anyone else, which is obviously very clearly carried by Hamilton and Verstappen. The top five podium combinations that have the most wins all feature Hamilton, and most of them feature Verstappen. So that makes sense. Hamilton's got over 100 wins, so he's gonna buff those numbers. Then, so that was your podium. Then you had Leclerc in fourth, Hadjar in fifth, Colapinto in sixth, Lawson in seventh, Gasly eighth, Sainz ninth, and Behrman 10th, taking home the final point. Below Behrman was Piastri, Hulkenberg, Bortoleto, Ocon, Stroll, and Bottas. Albon, Alonso, Russell, Norris, and Perez did not finish, and Lindblad did not start. Now, there is a pretty big name in there, pretty big names, I should say, in that did not finish category, but we will get to that. First, we have to have a good day and a bad day. My good day went to Kimi Antonelli, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and Franco Colapinto. My bad day went to a whole lot of people. We got George Russell, Charles Leclerc, McLaren, the McLaren strategy team specifically as well, Sergio Perez, and Nate. And we'll get into Nate, why Nate had a bad day later at the very end. And then a new segment, In Memoriam, the marmot that Albon vehicular manslaughtered in practice on Friday. We're going to hold a brief moment of silence. All right, that's enough of that. The drama for the race, in a race full of it, was started early with three formation laps and Lindblad's car failing to start for the second formation lap. The reason for the second lap, like the second formation lap, in my opinion, for at least from what I can tell, maybe not opinion, but from what I could tell, was an issue with the lights. Then Lindblad couldn't start and he had to be wheeled out, and that was the reason for the third formation lap. However, they were wheeling him off the track while cars were like cars had to avoid the marshals wheeling Lindblad's car to get in position on the grid. So, bit of a failure, another failure of many on race control's part in their gloried history. Um, and yeah, it was a bit of a mess of a start, very chaotic. No one really knew what was happening. At first, it looked like Kimi had a false start, but maybe they told him they were doing another formation lap. And if he did have a false start, then he got saved by the formation lap, which is very lucky for him. But the five lights were red, and they were red for a really, really long time, which is why I think it was a problem with the lights itself. Um, it had rained before the race, and because of that, both McLarens were on inters. And during the formation laps, Piastri was begging the pit wall to call him in to change tires. They didn't. And on the race start, him and Norris both had to go into the pits on lap one after getting smoked on the start by everyone behind them. It was supposed to be a wet race, but the only rain again came from before the race, and the inters were not necessary at the end of the day. Even with three formation laps and therefore three opportunities to make a change, the McLaren strategy team did nothing and it did not pay off at all. The rest of the race was as much of a disaster as Norris had to be pitted early for a reliability issue that then later saw him retire. So he pitted, changed his tires, and like a lap or two later, pitted again to re- you know, there was like a reliability issue. That's all they said. They wouldn't explain more. Um, and then he ultimately retired from the race. And Piastri could only get to 11th after their mess of a start and a race. A pointless race for them in multiple senses of the word for the reigning champs. Now, got to get to the drama. the Mercedes drama, the most fun part of the race, the most meme-filled part of the race. It was great. So Russell takes pole in qualifying, and he has a solid lead, and he was holding off Antonelli for the first 20 plus laps. Antonelli was putting the pressure on him, admittedly, like he was doing really well, but he just couldn't make the move. He couldn't get past him, just like in the sprint. Um, and Hamilton even got up there and won like one time, but it was mainly the Mercedes show. But Hamilton did have the lead briefly. Um, they were running for a long time on the softs, but because it was so cold out, the tire deg was nowhere near as high as it normally is, so they could run long on the softs. And it felt like it was going to come down to who had the better pit stop call and time. But then Russell's car stopped working, and then it caught fire, and it took him out of the race. And he was furious getting out of the car. He threw his like headrest thing. He was like slamming the car. He actually got a fine for throwing the headrest onto the track. And then there was a great shot of him standing behind the fence, looking at the marshals wheeling away his car. If you pay attention to F1 in any capacity, you've probably seen it. But if you haven't, it's at the end of the doc. I will show it at the end of the episode. But it was great. He looked like a bit of a supervillain at first, but then like it was a very tough moment. And it sucks to make fun of for a few reasons, but it was amazing in many other ways. We all love George. We love his diva-ness. Hannah specifically requested that I say and mention that how much we all love George. So sorry, George. It really, people were hyping this up as like a turning point in the championship, a do or die moment almost. I don't think it is that. I think there's going to be plenty of more opportunities for George, especially when you look at Kimmy's European stint from last year where he was just awful. So Russell isn't out yet. But I think morale is low for him after the Canadian Grand Prix. He is nearly 50 points behind Antonelli in the standings, which is a lot. Um, and after he went out, he basically got gifted Antonelli the win. No one could catch Kimmy. Um, it's a brutal result for Russell. Jokes aside, he was looking really strong before that moment. I do think he'll bounce back. I think Monaco's qualifying, especially, is going to be a treat this year. There was great racing between the two Mercedes teammates. Antonelli brought a lot of pressure, and when he made mistakes, he didn't like take out George doing so. And so he suffered from his own mistakes. Antonelli did, and I think that's great. I think that's Toto is smart to let them race. He knows how to handle two teammates that are battling. Obviously, he's not going to let another Brosades happen, and I don't think Russell and Antonelli's personalities would let that happen anyway. So, but the Mercedes battle is far from over, and they have been the best part of the year so far, and I'm excited to see more from them. So thank you to the Mercedes for keeping the year interesting, even when they're so far ahead of everyone else. Um, the race, not a good time for George, not a good time for one of our championship, uh, you know, hopefuls, but it was a good time for our multi-champion winners and a rough time for those champion winners' teammates. Hamilton ditched Ferrari simulator leading up to the week and decided to rally an instinct. It worked. He finished second in the race and was driving really well. He kind of looked like the Hamilton of old, and he even gave us some solid racing with Verstappen, which I always love seeing these two race. um, he was in the highest spirits he's been in since joining Ferrari. Verstappen, while still having some frustrations with the car, had it running solidly in fourth and then inherited third after Russell's DNF. Red Bull is slowly coming back to form, and Verstappen is looking well and better in the car. Both were very happy on the podium. They, lifted Kimi onto their shoulders, or Lewis did, and they were celebrating very heavily. It was great to see. It was awesome to watch. And in the cool down room, Verstappen and Hamilton were deep in conversation about racing. And then Antonelli shows up and he kind of just sits there and stays silent, more or less. I kind of compared it to a kid whose parent ran into a friend at the grocery store. That was my takeaway from the cool down room. It's very funny, but it was great to see them race. It was great to see them talk about it at the end. the bad blood from 2021 has clearly washed away. Um, and I mean, man, imagine if they did like a podcast or whatever, you just listening to them talk about racing for an hour, that'd be awesome. Uh, so good showing for the multi-time world champions on the grid. And, their teammates, Leclerc was frustrated all weekend. He called the sprint a total disaster, and it was a disaster. And he was pretty much silent the whole race, aside from telling his own team not to talk to him until the end of the race, or unless there was something absolutely critical. And then Hadjar had a really bad sprint, um, but did finish behind Leclerc in the race, even if he was a full lap behind. So it wasn't really close. But he may have finished below Leclerc, but I do think he had a better time doing so. Um, Another big story in this race, full of big stories, was Alpine's performance, mainly Colapinto. He finished in sixth. Gasly took home eighth, further solidifying them as the kings of the midfield. Colapinto has been on one lately and raced clean and brought it home for his best finish yet. I haven't drafted my Colapinto apology form yet, but I'm considering it. Alpine, against all odds, are operating like a competent racing team. They also have announced Gucci as their sponsor next year, so they will be known as Gucci Racing Alpine Formula One Team. Uh, and that's pretty much all I got to say about that. I hope the liveries will be good. That's it. I hope the liveries, the special liveries, and the drip will be good, hopefully as well. So, but they are, like I said, operating like a competent racing team, and I am, you know, I haven't, like I said, I haven't drafted my Colapinto apology form yet. I've been considering it, but we'll see. We'll have to see how he does because his European stint was also not great last year. Um, Lawson split the Alpines and brought home enough points to put Racing Bulls above Haas, even with Lindblad having the issue at the start of the race, and which kickstarted all of our drama. Lawson has looked good this year, and so has Lindblad, even with the inconsistencies you'd expect from a rookie driver. Racing Bulls, in my opinion, are fine. They're not great. They don't suck. They're just fine. But they do need to be better than fine if they want to stay ahead of Haas and catch up to Alpine. Um, and I think they can. Uh, it's just going to depend on a lot of factors. They're like the midfield's tight right now, and it's you got to be good every weekend in order to stay on top, which is hard enough to believe that Alpine's the one doing it. Um, Haas, speaking of Haas, had a lot of talk going into the weekend. Both Ocon and Komatsu adamantly denied the rift rumors, with Komatsu going as far to call out journalists, which I loved him from him, by the way. He was like, "Is this what like fucking journalism is now? It's like bullshit." And I was like, "Yes, call out the sports journos. They deserve it. They're awful. They're the worst. They just make shit up all the time." So that that was good. I like that from him, and it's good for the team principal to kind of stand behind the team and to fight like the rumors and stuff like that. But on track, both cars were nowhere to be seen in the sprint, and while Behrman brought it home in 10th in the race, Ocon was so far down it became a talking point. His performance this year has been awful. Rumors or not, he really needs to pull it together, start showing more on track instead of being, just absolutely destroyed by his teammate. And because the battle, like we say every week, the battle for the midfield is tight. And if Ocon can't perform, maybe Haas, like, what do they do? I don't think they're going to swap him out mid-year. It's not necessarily their style, but it's you're going to need him to perform, and if he doesn't, then this could be his last year in the sport. If you're the difference between sixth and seventh place in the constructors, that's a lot of money that you're missing out on. Um, and he hasn't had it this year. But again, it's a long season. There's plenty of races left. So we will see how he gets on through the year, if he can pull it together, or if Behrman will just continue to blow him out of the water. Below Haas is Williams, which signs brought home 2 more points for them as they begin their very slow ascent up the standings. Albon had a rough weekend between murdering a marmot, doing poorly in the sprint, and not even finishing the race. Bad weekend for Albon. He had a bad weekend again at the last time, which kind of kicked off his stroke of bad luck in Europe. So hopefully it's not a repeat of that. They still have plenty of questions to answer as a team, but there is something out there. There's a glimpse of hope. I'm not all in on them, but I'm not completely out either. If you sold your Williams stock, you might be regretting it. If you've held on to it, I think that's not necessarily a bad idea, but I wouldn't buy any more right now. Um, Between Audi, Cadillac, and Aston Martin, the most exciting thing was Perez finishing up in 11th for the sprint after a bold call to race on softs. Perez penalty shot him down to 14th, but hey, that's pretty good for them. His suspension did decide to randomly snap on his way into the pits during the race, which closed the pits and gave us the most heroic shot of a marshal running out to pick up a piece of his car, of Perez's car, while other cars were still racing, and then he dove through the gap in the wall and in the fence. It was great. Maybe not the best moment for race control and safety, but it was cool and it was fun. And is anyone even surprised that race control like messed up again and it's created an unsafe scenario? It's sad that it's just a continual talking point. Um, and then, Audi failed to score again, their best moment being Bortoleto looking strong-ish in the sprint, and then Aston Martin is Aston Martin. They're horrible. The upgrades that were a quantum leap and major breakthrough were, as predicted, not either of those things. Their car still sucks, but because of Alonso's DNF, Stroll does overtake him in the standings. Um, so that is the race review. It was a lot of drama at the start, and then even more. It kind of just kept going. Once Russell retired, the race kind of calmed down a little bit, but you still got some good moments in there. It was a great race to have people over to watch. Um, and if you didn't see it and you have Apple TV, watch the full race. Don't just watch the highlights because this was a good one. Um, and it's a big talking moment for Russell, especially all of the news about him needing to turn it around and Canada being a pivotal week for him. That's just going to come back even stronger than it was before for Monaco next week. So, and Mercedes last year in Monaco were awful. They were so bad. And it's looking right now that Ferrari is the favorite for Monaco. We'll talk about it more next show, but it you come off of a DNF and then you're coming to a race where maybe your car isn't the best car anymore. I mean, that's a rough 1-2 punch, especially when you have, Japan where he doesn't do very well, and China where he doesn't like win, and Miami especially where he did horribly. So, um, it's Russell's gonna need to claw it back. And like I said, I don't think he's out. There's how many more how many more races are there? Hold on. Let me pull it up on my phone real quick. How many more races in the year? F1 schedule. Okay. That was round 5 and there's 22. So there's 17 more races. That's a lot of points up for grabs. So anything can happen in those seven. That's longer than 17 races is still longer than like a lot of seasons in F1 were. It was like 14 races for a very long time and even less earlier, like when it first started. So there's a lot of time for Russell to claw it back, to bring it back. And as we saw, this gap is not as big as Max's gap to Lando last year, and Max brought it back after the summer break. So you can't count Russell out. He's got more experience, especially when you consider that this European stint is coming up. And what was Kimmy's like? Let me see if I can find um the Kimmy's like rundown of result from his European stint. It was like it's like DNF 18th, 17th, DNF, 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 like 17th, DNF, and then ninth. He finished ninth at the end of the European stint. So he was really bad in Europe. And so we'll see if he can recover. There's no Imola this year, so no home race pressure. Uh, and he's leading the championship, where there's more pressure to keep winning and to keep having performances. Last year they weren't really fighting for anything at that time. Maybe, they got second overall, but he again because Kimmy kind of pulled it in at the end. But it's a long year. A lot can happen. 17 races left. All it takes is a bad run from Kimmy, and George is right back up there. All it takes is two DNFs from Kimmy and for George to win both times, and George leads. So if Kimmy DNFs in Monaco and DNFs in the race after, which is Barcelona, and George wins both of those, boom, George is ahead. It could switch so quickly. So that'll be, their battle is going to be something to watch for, and I think it's going to be good. I think it'll be entertaining, and as long as they I think they'll keep it clean, and as long as they do, it's going to be a good time. Maybe that's like the silver, excuse me, maybe that's like the silver lining of these horrible regs that everyone hates, me included. But the silver lining is that we get this awesome battle between the Mercedes. And there's rumors that, well, not rumors, the FIA is going to be testing the engines differently starting in Monaco, and that might like hurt Mercedes. So, which would hurt George more. If the battle at the front becomes closer, George suffers more than Kimi because George has to make that deficit up, which Lando did. Again, it's not impossible. So, I, you know, all that to say, the Diva is not done. The Diva is not down. Maybe the Diva's down, but he's not out. So, George is, I think he's going to bring the fight to Kimi, and, hopefully all the way. Maybe not all the way, because, like, come on, do you really want the championship decided in Abu Dhabi? No, no one really does. Let's be honest with ourselves. But so maybe we can have it settled in Qatar. Well, maybe Vegas or Brazil. Anyway, let's go to the end, I think. I think it'll go to the end and late in the year. Especially with the amount of points you can get from one race, it's going to be hard to be mathematically win before closer to the end. Anyway, so you know, George isn't out of it yet, and I'm excited to see how he comes back and bounces back and brings the fight in Monaco, or how Kimmy continues to just beat him down. So we'll see what happens. Um, but I don't think it's said and done, not yet at least. Anyway, moving on, our certified Ferrari moment. It goes to the McLaren strategy team. The McLaren strategy team. They are back in the certified Ferrari moment spot this week with their call to start on inters and refusal to adapt. World champions, everybody. That is your reigning world champions. I did see people talk about how these two, Lando and Oscar won the constructors and Lando won the drivers in spite of McLaren's strategy team, not because of it. And that is certainly true. Even like without all the papaya rules bullshit, it is still it is their weakest link. Their strategy team is their weakest link. So that is our certified Ferrari moment. I don't have our F1 FM, the radio moment, but it would be Charles yelling at his engineers. But we'll bring that back next week, or I guess the Monaco review, so in 2 weeks. And our pick the podium stats. Don't break tradition. The one time Nate decides to break from his Leclerc streak this year, and he gets 0 points out of it, literally zero for the race. The last time someone other than Dave got 0 points in a race weekend was me in Baku last year. And then no matter what you do, there's a teenager who does it better. The Antonelli believers were well rewarded this weekend. 4 correct first place predictions in the race: Andrew, me, Sam, and Nat, and 2 correct third place predictions in the sprint: Hannah and Nat. And then ADUO, I've heard nothing as of today. I wrote this on Tuesday, but as of today, I still haven't heard anything. So we'll probably talk about that more next week. Before we get to George, I know everyone wants to see George, whether if you're watching this on YouTube, I know everyone wants to see George, but we got to talk about the standings. So, um, they actually haven't changed from pick to podium. Sam is in first with 176. Got a whopping 40 points this week, and he got 43 in Miami. So picking Antonelli to win every race is doing well for him. I'm in second with 145 points. I got 25. I only had Antonelli right. And then Nat is in third with 125 points. He is somewhat catching up to me. Actually, no, yes. So our points difference is still 20 points after the sprint and after this race now. So that didn't change at all. And then Hannah is catching up though. She's got 115, so she's only 10 behind that. And then Andrew has 100, so he cracked triple digits. He got a big 25 points. And then Nate has 82, and then Dave has 16. Um, and I will leave you with this beautiful picture of George Russell looking at his car as the marshals take it away. Thank you for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment down below. When you think, tell me if you think Kimmy's gonna, you know, have a repeat European vacation, or if he's gonna bring it back. Tell me predict what race you think the championship is gonna end. You think it's going to Abu Dhabi? You think it's ending earlier than that? Let me know. Thank you for watching and good night.